Conversations.
Welcome to Gallatin Conversations. I'm here having a conversation with Esther Fishbaugh. Hi, Esther.
Hi. Hi, Josh.
How are you doing?
I am doing good. Busy. Yeah, that time of year. Up that one. Yeah.
So, how long have you been in the Gallatin County?
Let's see. I was born in Montana in Billings, and so I've been in the state all my life. But we moved to the Bozeman area in 1984, so we could attend college, and then we started a business here, and so we've been doing that ever since. So since 1986, we've had the same business. And it started in Gallatin County, but it's moved to Wyoming, and now we've got campground marinas up Townsend. So that's kind of our retirement. We used to have up to 56 campgrounds that we ran for the Forest Service, but we've cut back quite a bit just to be a little more retired and have a little more time to do a little better job of the marinas that we're doing.
Yeah, that's quite a business. What's that like? How does that work? Can you explain your business a little better?
The business is actually getting a permit with the federal government. So I've been working with the federal government for 41 years. And that is a learning curve all on its own. We bid on permits that they put out to run their campgrounds. Our primary customer is the American people. So we're serving all 330 million owners of these campgrounds, and we keep them in good shape and good repair and hire people to be there during the summer, basically for cleaning and customer care. And so we've been doing that since 1986 on these campgrounds.
How do you go about getting government contracts? What's that like? I personally have never dealt with like federal contracts. So
Well, there's a whole government entity that puts out different calls for bids, but they call it a request for proposals. And you can get on a list and they'll send those to you of what come up. And as a concessionaire, you'll get everything that's opening up for the concessions. I get them from Tahoe and Oregon, and Arizona, and those I don't bid on. They're too far from home, and that makes quite a bit different, a larger organization to have to run campgrounds in several different states. I found if we just did the two states, Wyoming and Montana, that was enough to keep us busy in the summertime. So once you get those requests for proposals, you put together your bid. The first one I did was on the Gallatin in 1986, and that one, I think our final bid was about 20 pages, and now when I do one, the final bid will be 200 pages or more.
Wow.
When we do that, yeah. So it's gotten a lot more technical, and there's a lot more oversight, and there's a lot more promises you have to make when you're running these campgrounds. So
200 pages?
Yeah, it's over 200 pages for one bid. And the bids will be, right now they're a 5-on-5. We've been asking them to do 20 and 30-year contracts, because then you can put a little more money into the infrastructure. Now, when you put the money into the infrastructure in these federally owned campgrounds, the federal government ends up owning it. So you've got to be able to amortize that before you get out on that one. The contracts we have with the Bureau of Reclamation, which are the ones we're keeping right now, they will run for 20 years.
Oh,
so
wow.
you can do a little more with the upkeep and just what you put into those campgrounds.
I didn't realize that those campgrounds were handled by individuals. I didn't, or like companies. I didn't realize that they were subcontracting those out.
Yeah, because the campgrounds require personal attendance, so you have to have the employees that are there, not 24/7, but they're there daily. And they do the cleaning, and we do the maintenance and repair, and we pay for all of that out of the fees that come into those campgrounds. So it's like you're the owner. All 330 million Americans are the owners. We're keeping it in good shape for the next owner that comes to use it after you've been there to use it. So we're like the maid, we're like the plumber, we're like the electrician, we're like the any of those service people that you would pay us to take care of your house if they had any of those needs. Well, that's the same way with those campgrounds, but we just get the payment in smaller doses with the individuals paying to stay there. So the federal government pretty much pays to have the facilities there. That's what the federal government takes on. But as a concessionaire, I pay to keep it clean and keep it repaired and do the day-to-day maintenance on it. So, and that's worked pretty well. They've been doing that since 1982. So I was one of the first concessionaires, the first concessionaire in Region 1, Forest Service Region 1.
So how did you get into that? Like, how did you decide that you wanted to do that? Or?
Well, we had been camp managers, and so we had been doing pretty much the same thing at a youth camp for a Christian organization. And we had put in septic systems and electrical systems and built cabins and done all that kind of stuff. So we had that background. And while we were going to college here, we were needing summer jobs. And so we were looking in the paper and we saw that advertisement come through for a request for proposals. So we put in our proposal and we were the successful bidder on that one. So little did we know.
I've been doing it ever since.
I've been doing it ever since, yes.
So you said you went to school, you came here to Gallatin County for school? That's why you guys came?
Yeah,
that's why you came here?
Yeah, my husband was finishing up his science background. He's been in fish and wildlife and then got a teaching degree on top of that. And he's been a teacher ever since. So we've been in public schools and private schools, and now he teaches homeschool students. And I finished up with a master's degree in exercise physiology. I've got an undergrad degree from the College of Great Falls when it was called the College of Great Falls. I think it's now called Providence College in Great Falls. So the name has changed, but I got an undergrad degree there. I finished a 4-year degree in 3.5 years, summa cum laude.
Oh, wow.
So that one is in recreation, which I worked in for 41 years, and business administration, which helped me because we incorporated. I've been the CEO of my own corporation for that since 1997. So we've been doing that. And that one, the skill set that goes with being a CEO, you've got to be into logistics. You have to also be overseeing the financial end of it. You have to know how to handle personnel because we're a small company. We don't have an HR department. We have to do that all ourselves. It's reading the laws, understanding the laws. It's reading the federal contracts, understanding the federal contracts. So there's a lot of legal things. I think the best class I ever had as an undergrad was business law. That one I've used all the time is a business law class, and just it's probably saved me hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, literally. And so because I knew what the law said, and sometimes people would like to take advantage of you if you don't know. So,
is it hard to read those contracts? Is it?
You have to understand the language they're using. And then when you write your proposal, you have to use the language that they are requiring. So yeah, you do have to understand that. It just takes practice to do it. But it's like reading any legislation that you might get. You've got to have the language in a certain form, and the meaning of the words has to be set. You can't have words that are variable. So a lot of times the legislation will have terms listed at the front so that they're defining what the terms are going to be when they're using them within that legislation. And I think that's a good thing. So, and that I've had practice reading, doing it every year.
So you said you got a master's, right?
I have a master's of science degree.
Has that been used in your business at all, or was that just like for fun, or?
Well, that was yes and no. My undergrad degree is what I've been doing, and the business administration that I had with that undergrad degree, yes. But just learning to read science and learning to understand the facts and what is hyperbole and what is not the conclusion that the facts are leading you to. I found that research, when I did my own research, that and my reading of the scientific literature to do the background for that research, that has come in very, very strong in having to read these government programs.
Oh, yeah.
So we've had to deal with, in the campgrounds, we've got to deal with the EPA and the DEQ. So that's the Department of Environmental Quality, and we have water systems, and they've tightened up on those water systems a lot in 41 years. Where we used to have to take one test a quarter on each drinking water system, we now have to test it every month. And it used to be able to have 3 coliforms and still pass in 100 milliliters of water, and now you can't have any. So you have to keep your systems really clean, and you've got to read the regulations, and you got to know how to apply the regulations, and then you have to be able to teach the regulations, and then you have to monitor that what you taught is being done. So those are all things that a CEO has to do in the business that I'm in. So it's a lot of technical work and understanding that sometimes keeps you up at night. Did I get it right? How's that one?
So you said you grew up in Billings?
I was born in Billings. My mom was mad at the doctors in Great Falls at the time. So but my dad and mom were farming near Carter, Montana. So it was north of Carter by about 5 miles. We were raised in the middle of nowhere. And then I went to school in Fort Benton for high school. But I was in a one-room schoolhouse until 8th grade. So that was an adventure with, I think we ended the last year with 4 students, but I started with about 20 in one room. So that was one classroom, but they had Teach Reach attached to it. So that was a pretty nice little apartment for a teacher. But it was probably 30 miles from any town where you could get groceries, that little school was. So we had to be pretty creative. They'd kick us outside. You had to go outside for recess. So we would race stink bugs, and we would get tumbleweeds and have tumbleweed races, and used our imaginations quite a bit to keep ourselves entertained out there in the school. But we had a library along the shelf underneath the windows, and I would get done with my lessons, and then I could read what was in that library. And I think I read all the classics by the time I was in 8th grade. So that was probably the best part of my education out there in that one-room schoolhouse.
So you grew up in Great Falls then, actually. So you were born in Billings, but you grew up in Great Falls?
Great Falls area.
Great Falls
I was
area.
outside of town on a dryland wheat farm.
Okay.
So that's probably some of the hardest farming to do because you're totally dependent on the moisture you get through the summer. So we watched my dad. He didn't believe in gambling, but he put that seed in the ground every year and hoped that it would get enough rain to make a crop. And some years it did, and some years it didn't. So, and being on the farm, we raised pigs and chickens and cows. So we had our own meat and we had our own eggs, but you use equipment. So we used a lot of. I drove the tractor and the combine and cars and trucks, and learned to drive a grain truck at age 14. So we were doing that for harvest. And my dad, that's the only thing we get paid for, is helping with the harvest out there. That's
quite a different life than what a lot of people grow up with today. For example, myself.
Yeah.
Are there aspects of that kind of a life or growing up that you miss relative to?
Well, I like being outside. I've always liked being outside, so being an outside person. My hobby here is gardening. I like to garden and raise things, watch them grow. And my husband and I have done hiking and backpacking and canyoneering and you name it. We've done just about every kind of outdoor activity you can do, mountain climbing and rock climbing and some of those things too. Until we got kids, and then we thought, well, that's maybe a little more dangerous than what we need to be doing because we have dependents, and so we need to be responsible for that. And now our knees don't bend good enough to do that stuff anymore, so we're into the kayaking and canoeing. We've done several rivers and rafting trips, and that's kind of what we do for relaxation out there. But and my job with running the campgrounds in Wyoming, I would be tenting it for at least about 30 or 40 days out of the summer because I was hauling equipment down with a truck and a trailer. And so I didn't have room to have an RV to go with me. So the easiest and quickest was just bring a tent and a sleeping bag. But my foam pads got thicker and thicker as I got older. And by the time we got to be the age we are now, you'd point that tent downhill So in the morning, you could just kind of roll out and then stand up, and that worked for a long time. But now I'm retiring from those campgrounds, so I probably won't have to do that too much anymore. So.
Well, you're retiring those campgrounds. What are you intending to do with your spare time?
Well, I hope to work less hours, because in the summertime with a seasonal job, I was probably between 12 and 16 hours a day. And some days I'd work between 16 and 20 hours. So it's just that much work that had to be done because your season is so short. Mm-hmm. You have to earn your income in 3 months. And hopefully that'll get you through the other 9 months out of the year. Because of the changes with the Forest Service and what they required for reporting, it took us year-round. I worked full-time year-round to run those campgrounds. And we made, in the fall and the winter, we were making plans for what improvements we were going to do in the campgrounds that next summer. There is a government program called, it was a law passed in 1967, I believe, called the Granger-Thai Act. And under the Granger-Thai Act, all the lease money I paid for the privilege of operating the campgrounds for the Forest Service could be credited if I did a capital improvement project in the campgrounds. So, of course, there's never enough money in the Forest Service to catch up with all the backlog of maintenance that they need to do. That's really on their responsibility to get done. So we would take on some of those backlogs of maintenance and do that through the summer. And that's the kind of thing we had to plan for. And to do that, we had to pay Davis-Bacon wages because that's what the law requires. But we could get our total lease payment forgiven if we did that capital improvement project. So we did things like building an outhouse for them, or putting in bear boxes, or which would hold your food, especially if you're a motorcyclist and you're in the wilderness area or next to a wilderness area, like we did when we had the campgrounds over near Red Lodge. I mean, the bears would come down in those campgrounds. And so it was nice to have a place to lock the food and not be on your motorbike. So we put in a lot of those upright grills. We put in new fire rings, new tables. And those are things that normally the Forest Service would put in as they rehabilitated the campgrounds. But we took those on and did a lot of those. So I had a lot of experience with construction type planning and estimations, and then executing it. We put in a bunch of holding tanks, so we had to do the DEQ, had to do reviews for NEPA, and that would you partner with the Forest Service and make sure that the NEPA that they had done would be applicable to the contracts that you were trying to get to do work like that. So that keeps me busy during the winter. Then we had other things that we did in the winter were employee handbooks. So we'd make employee handbooks and update those, and plan your training sessions, learn how to use PowerPoint. I have an 8-hour PowerPoint for my employees.
Wow.
Would you like to sit through 8 hours of PowerPoint?
No, I would not.
We do break it up. So they'll have it in sections. Yeah.
This all sounds like a lot of work, really hard. And you said you had children. What was it like for you balancing that?
Well, at first, and the kids just went with me in the summertime. We have a cat that thinks he needs to have some attention before he goes outside. Yeah, and they would just come with me, and they'd kind of hang out and do whatever I was doing. And it didn't... we paid the kids as they got older and could do more valuable work, so they got paid as part of the business. So that was really good for them. They're both really hard workers now, and doing very well in the jobs that they have. So.
It sounds like a very unique experience getting to go to all these campgrounds growing up with your parents.
Well, they accuse us of never knowing how to camp, to really go camping in a campground, which we probably don't, because we go there to work. We work our crazy heads off. So occasionally we would take a weekend off. We'd try to be home on weekends, but we take a weekend. We climb Cloud Peak, which is a 13,000-foot peak. That was kind of interesting hike. I think it was one of the prettiest I've ever done, and that's in the middle of the Bighorn Mountains in Wyoming. So, so we would get, and we take our kayaks with us, and if we have an evening off, we can kayak some of the lakes and recreate as we did it. So we're going to miss that down in the Bighorns because they had some really pretty areas for recreation like that.
So you also said that you had lots of bears coming down in the campground. Do you have a favorite bear experience or?
I can tell you bear stories. One that stands out was a gal from Florida, and she was a little bit nervous camping in bear areas. So she set her tent up so that the door was facing her car. And if she heard anything in the night, she was going to get out of her tent and go run and get in her car. Well, unbeknownst to her, these bears, sometimes they relocate, problem bears, and this one had been relocated, and it was an expert on getting into cars. And so it bent her back door over and was in the back seat of her car, tearing up her back seat. They like the foam in there for some reason. They'll just chew that foam all up. Well, she heard something, and so she got out of her tent and ran to the car. She did not get in. So she's not knowing what to do, afraid to go back to her tent. So, I mean, I have had some wonderful employees. She went to the camp host and woke them up, and they invited her to come stay with them in their RV. And then the next morning, the camp host, well, he chased the bear out of her car, so it wouldn't do too much damage. So he went down there and chased it out. I don't think he had to use pepper spray. He was just being real noisy, and the bear couldn't find anything, and so it left. But the next morning, he went down with a sledgehammer and pounded her door back into shape so it at least stay shut, and they put plastic on the window, and then gave her a note because she had to tell her insurance company that it was a bear who had damaged her car and not an accident of her own because she wouldn't have a police report.
Yeah.
So that's all she had. So
that would be quite the story.
yeah. So, and if your insurance company didn't believe you,
oh man,
yeah, that would be, so he wrote her a note. So it's good.
So you've decided to run for House District 62, right?
Yes, House District 62. That's the district I live in.
So that's quite a new step in a different direction.
Yeah, I've always been interested in policy. Pretty much, I wouldn't say politics. Politics can be messy. Yeah, and that's going to be an adventure I'll have to get used to. But policies and just common sense solutions to problems. Being a CEO of my own corporation, one of the things I've had to do is think laterally. Now, what I mean by thinking laterally is you don't just take the first solution that appears, that you think about the inputs, the basic issues that are causing the problems, and then come up with solutions based on maybe what's available to you and what is most acceptable for maybe surrounding communities and other things. So it's gathering in a lot of information, facts, and resources that may not be what you would default to, that you would more give a little more thought to and bring it in. So I can be pretty creative that way. I can usually come up with maybe 5 or 6 or 7 different ways to make a solution for a problem that comes up, just because of the experiences I've had. And being in the background I've had, when you're on the farm, you don't run to town every 2 minutes to go get something at the store. You had to make do with what you had out there. And so we could be pretty creative. So
what inspired you to start running for a House seat, get involved in, like, politics is messy. So what inspired you to get over that part and get on the ballot?
It's just the experience that I can bring to do some common sense solutions. So we need some common sense solutions to how we're taxed. So why are we being taxed? So I've done a lot of reading of the founding fathers and what did they propose for government to do. And I'd like to bring government back to just what they're supposed to do. Americans, I love Americans. They are so inventive. I mean, they're just great. I mean, at campground, they'd come in with a 34-foot motorhome and they'd have a 32-foot site and they would park it. They'd get that thing parked. And they'd be very creative on how they did it, and they usually didn't damage anything. So I have a good faith in the American people. They can do for themselves an awful lot if government will get out of the way. Government, whenever it takes on a task, does it poorly. They don't do it very well. They do it inefficiently, and they take far longer than the private sector or the individual ever could do. So I'd like to return some of that freedom to the American people so that they're not so constrained with ridiculous regulation, and then put government on a much leaner track where they, as a business, yeah, he wanted out. As a business, it was not a bad thing to have a lean year. It really wasn't, because you looked at everything. How can I be more efficient in what I do? Because then you are making your business stronger by being more efficient. We need to make our government go through that process where we don't give them every dollar they ask for. We just can't do that. So they need to be very focused on what their job is out of each department. They need to be very focused and make sure that they're getting that done and overseeing whatever regulation they've put together. We aren't overseeing. If you look at Minnesota, they aren't overseeing anything. And that's where the fraud has become rampant. So enforcement and inspection are every bit as important as lawmaking. So I'd like to see that shift come into our federal government. You know who the best inspectors are of government? That's you and me if we have that information. So I'd like government to be more transparent. So do we know how does Gallatin County spend their money? Do we know how much money Gallatin County is spending? What was the valuation of the property that they were doing in 2020? I looked this up, and it was about the property valuation that they were basing their taxes on was about $256 million in the county. So by 2025, it was 750 some million.
Wow.
That's triple. Their costs did not triple by 300%. They went up maybe 30%, but they didn't triple by 300%. Yet we got taxed. We were actually being taxed less mills in 2020 than we were in 2025. So what did they do? How much money did they actually take in, and where did it all go? So that's the questions I like to ask, and those are the questions I'm trying to find the answers to, and then we'll see if there can be some savings in how government is done. That's one of the things that I'm kind of interested in. I'm a detail person. I like details. I like looking that kind of thing up and just being a little more precise about what it is we're doing. You can't solve problems by just throwing money at them. You just can't. So you have to have a goal. You have to have a plan. You have to have an understanding of what made the problem and what solutions might work.
So how do you see yourself in the state legislature able to get people onto a goal oriented in a similar direction to produce common sense?
I think I'm seeing myself as a resource. So I'm bringing experience in, bringing common sense in, bringing a commitment to do the research, to bring them the facts, and to help them analyze those facts, and then to help them come up with different solutions. So you might have a solution that a lot of people favor, but somebody is dead set against. Can we accommodate that person in any way? What can we do to marry the differences, if there's any way to do that at all, if it's not outrageous? Some of the things my Democrat colleagues are proposing are just outrageous, and that's you can't go along with. But I think if we can bring the legislature back to the cooperative ideas of yesteryear, where we're all out to solve the same problem, and let's put our resources together and our experiences together, you can come up with some pretty good solutions. I think pretty creative ones.
Well, and the populace is very invested in figuring out taxes, it seems like, in the Gallatin County.
Well, they just don't know. You ask anybody, do you know how much your school district is spending? I have properties that have to have a certain amount of money, and I make a budget on how much money can we spend on doing maintenance on those properties. And then you have to start putting money aside to do major improvements. So why is government always required to spend every last dime? They should have a side to them that puts money aside to make those big projects more affordable, because you might do it over 10 years of paying for it instead of doing a loan. Banks are getting really, really pretty rich off of the interest money of our national debt. Have you ever seen how much interest money those banks are making?
I have not.
It's close to $1 trillion. Per year. Per year. So if we can, as a government, find a way to pay for the big projects before they get there, that would be, and that's a savings account, that's bonds account. I mean, my question is, with all the money we took in for Gallatin County, why is Cottonwood still a wreck of a road out there? Why is that? Do we have a maintenance map of how old our sewers are underneath those streets? When were they put in, and when do we need to replace those? If they're getting to be 100 years old, that one needs to be on the list, and they need to be replaced. Now, I haven't gone to the maintenance department. I don't know how they keep track of that. That's one of the things I'd like to learn and do that. Out of the state government, it can only be through regulation and inspection again, and just holding the county government accountable for what it is they have to do. So I think they just did that with a letter to our county commissioners, because they're not even up to date with their bookkeeping. So that's one of the things I'd like to see the state continue to do, is to the inspections and the transparency on where's the money coming from and where is it spent.
You got a lot of years reading federal paperwork. How do you see that, all that experience kind of helping you? Like, do you see that experience helping you in writing the legislation for tax proposals, for infrastructure proposals?
I think it helps more in analyzing what's coming out and what we have. So you have to read your code annotated, and then you have to understand what it is it's saying in the code annotated before you start writing more legislation to change the code annotated. So you can have goals, and they actually have an office, and Helena, that makes sure the writing of any legislation is done according to accepted processes and rules, so that they have the right language in there, and that it has the intended consequences and not some unintended consequences. So that, of course, you'll use that as a resource to help you to get to the goal. I think I would like to see more regulation struck from the code annotated, and just get the regulation reduced for businesses and for individuals for your own property. Do you own your own property? So that's a big question going around right now with a lot of people, where they're saying, with the way taxes are and the penalty for not paying taxes, you don't even own your own property. Do we need to tax property at inflated values when we, as wage earners, we don't get inflated wages just because it's another year down the road and we're living in a more desirable location now? So those are the things that we'd like to have a robust discussion on, and see if there can't be some caps put on how the valuation of your property goes. It used to be you were evaluated every 6 years. Now it's every 2 years. The last evaluation, there's a lawsuit going on right now where they were supposed to use the last year's valuation of your property to set your property taxes. They used 3 years combined to set the property taxes. So there's a lawsuit going on because they're saying that was not fair, because in the last 2 years, property values have come down. So that one, that's where our government has to be held accountable to do their job according to the law as it's written in the law, and that's fair to everybody. I have been paying. I just found this out when they did the last assessment of our property. So every 2 years you get an assessment. We actually had a person come out and evaluate our property. We had put a new building on there, which is this three-sided equipment shed. So, and we had reported it. It was already in their books, but they had to come out and inspect it. And the gal was looking around the property going, well, where's your 16-foot wide by 36 long building? And we're going, that was a trailer house. We moved off of this property in 1998 so we could build this house. It's been on my property tax rolls for 25 years, 27 years. And I've been paying on that, being assessed on that. And I had no idea they were still doing it. And they've had 3 different assessors come out here and inspect our property over that amount of time. And I didn't know that one was still on there and I was still being taxed on that.
I'm sure they're not refunding you either.
I don't know if I'll even take the time to go ask for it because I don't think it'll ever happen. But that's one of the things I'd like to see under transparency. Do you know what you're being taxed on and how your house is being evaluated? This house was being evaluated because of the number of peaks it has. And then they assumed the interior was going to have a certain value because they had so many peaks on it. Well, my husband built the house, and by the time we got to redoing the interior, it was pretty much stock materials because he said, well, we'll upgrade it later when it wears out. But yeah, and so, but they're going to put us in a new valuation class and a higher one for the taxes on it. In 2023, our taxes on this property jumped 30%. 1 year, 30%. And it hasn't gone down. This last year, we were higher yet again. And people are saying, oh, they've gone down. Well, not here. So we'll see if 2026 taxes go down because this is now considered a homestead. So,
what do you think about that legislation that just came out, the long-term rentals and...
It's
or let me rephrase. Do you think there's a better solution that you have in mind that you think?
Well, there needs to be more study on the whole system of how you evaluate the property. So that's kind of why I'm focusing on how is your property evaluated. But they shifted, all they did, and this has been the bane of legislation all over, is they're saying, we're going to tax people with second homes because they're all out-of-staters. Well, no, they're not. They're all Montanans. So they're getting higher tax on their second homes, their little cabins on Flathead Lake and other places. And businesses, you tax the businesses. Well, we went through a 30% inflation in the last 5 years, 30%. No business can pass on a 30% price increase in that amount of time. We're still, as businesses, trying to catch up from that 30% inflation. And now they're increasing. Some of the breweries around here saw a 30% increase on their taxes in 1 year.
Oh, wow.
Like I did. And so those businesses, they can't pass that on with the price of their beers. They can't. They can't do that. So they're going to have to creep it up over time and hope they don't go out of business in the meantime. Is that fair to those businesses? No. So there needs to be a fairer way of having everybody pay on that one. The best way is to reduce government. You've got to reduce the amount of government. They will spend every penny they get in. They always will. We need to keep them leaner and hungrier and force them to prioritize, to really do the hard work to pick out what their priorities are. So
how do you see yourself trying to reduce the size and the scope of some of the government? Do you have a particular way you want to do that, or are you open to all options?
Yeah, that is going to be the hard part. I mean, reducing regulation helps all across the board, but it's also having the conversation and actually having the pressure to give up those areas that governments want to spend their money on, that they're not really suited to do that. Return that to the local charities. One of the examples I give is the Story Mansion. The Story Mansion was a nice historic building, and Bozeman spent over $1 million acquiring that to prevent it from having a developer come in and tear it down and make houses out of it, out of that property. Well, that's not the function of government. That's not something that we can't do for ourselves. So if they wanted to preserve that, they needed to go to the historic societies and say, hey, here's the preservation. We'll maybe give you a matching grant, but not get themselves into it. It was a boondoggle. I don't know how much they spent on having to repair it. And it was in the millions doing that. So another one is they spent money on a tract of land to build a transfer station. And they did it in a way that defrauded the developer who had bought that land. And they ended up in a lawsuit that they had to spend $5 million on to reimburse him for their ill-conceived and ill-thought-out one. Now that is a good project for, they needed to prioritize their project for the county. A transfer station would be okay, but the research was hasty and not done well, and without community input and without the developer or lawyers looking through it. So it needs to move a little slower on some of that stuff, but they need to be just out of the anything but the nuts and bolts of providing for streets, things you can't do for yourself. You can get a house for yourself. I don't support having them build tiny homes for the homeless. The homeless problems has many roots to it, very many roots. And sometimes giving them the house is not the solution to that. So, or giving them free needles is not the solution to the homeless problem. And the government should not be in doing any of that. So we can get homes for ourselves if we have a strong and robust economy and we're not being taxed out of those homes. So those are some of the things I'd like to see the government do less of and just concentrate on what they need to do more of. What do they need to do more of? Law enforcement. Inspections, make sure the laws are being followed. Support their law enforcement, support their judges and their justices. We can't do that for ourselves. We can't. Government's number one job is to punish the evildoer. That's right out of the Bible. That's what the government's job is to do. So the court systems and the law enforcement systems are part of that. The other thing they need to do is support infrastructure. So roads and bridges and water systems, water treatment systems, wastewater treatment systems. Those are legitimate functions of government. Some of the social issues are better handled by your independent charities and churches and others like that.
So, is there any other issues that you are looking forward to kind of trying to tackle alongside with the property taxes and the deregulation?
Well, Governor Gianforte has wanted to up the spending and resources on mental illness. Now, I had a mother who suffered with paranoid schizophrenia. So we lived in a dysfunctional household when she was not well. And we went through the psychiatric help, and it was pretty pathetic. And the things they did to her were just horrendous, trying to get some kind of treatment. And she was not a cooperative patient. So I've always been a little bit interested in how does the brain work and how does that illness work. Schizophrenia has many causes. Right now, we are promoting schizophrenia. A person with schizophrenia cannot work. They cannot keep a job. Their fears become their realities, and they are reacting to those fears all the time in inappropriate ways. So it's really tough for them to live in a family. People that are around them get sucked into their delusions. It's a horrible, horrible condition to have anybody get into. And legalizing marijuana, when it's at the concentrations that it's at right now, causes schizophrenia. It's documented. This is a fact. Overdosing on marijuana, especially with the male brain, will come in with schizophrenia as one of the presenting factors, as well as the overdose. Well, medicine can get them through the overdose, but not the schizophrenia. So that person is now on the government breadline for the rest of their lives because they can't work. They can't live in a family. A lot of them are in the streets. I mean, it is a horrible situation. And here with the drug use and drug overdose, we're promoting that. And so now we have a mental health crisis in our nation because of the I would say, inappropriate and unintelligent way we're handling the drugs and in the society. We don't need to promote that. It's immoral for a government to get tax dollars off of making people sick. That's immoral. It's immoral for government to get tax dollars off of people with a gambling addict. It's immoral for them to get money off of alcoholics. I'm sorry, government needs to rethink how they're getting their tax dollars, and by encouraging these addictive behaviors is wrong. It's just plain wrong, and it's just morally wrong. And I'd like to see that discussion happen and have the government back away from that. And maybe there can be some reduction in the potency of marijuana so that it wouldn't, I mean, it's legal right now. I don't know that you can back out of that, but you might be able to mitigate some of its harmful effects by having less potent available if you're going to do it at all. But otherwise, I'd like to see those facts brought out and really be debated in the legislature. So.
Do you mind if I ask about some of your experiences dealing with schizophrenia?
Oh, gosh.
If you're willing, or is there any?
I mean, it was pretty miserable being raised. My mom was not able to live with a husband, so my dad had to move out of the house, and so they were separated for about 8 years in there, and my younger sister and I were left with my mom. So when you're schizophrenic, they have a problem. They're not sure quite what causes schizophrenia. There's probably several areas that cause it, but they can't process the input of a normal life. So if you've ever looked at a Van Gogh painting, he was a schizophrenic. And looking at that painting, you can see what he's doing. They will mix up the input coming in. So you have different centers in your brain that process your senses. So if you have a sound coming in and getting processed by the vision center, that's confusing. You'll have a color come in as a sound. My mom would come home from the grocery store absolutely exhausted, just trying to sort out all the senses that she had that were not being routed to the right part of the brain to be processed normally. So it just made her world very threatening. And so she was always fearful that someone was out to get her. I used to work the ambulance. I worked the ambulance for 4 years full time in the late 80s. And I would pick up patients in schizophrenic break. It sounded just like my mom. Just exactly like it. And we took them to the hospital. The hospital didn't know what to do with them. There was no precautions taken. This one particular patient ended up harming himself terribly, and they ended up taking him to Warm Springs at the time to get the care he needed. But then a lawyer wrote in the newspaper just a few weeks after that these patients shouldn't be carted off to Warm Springs. They need to be treated in the mental health facilities that we have, or with the mental health programs we have in our own communities. And I'm like, there weren't any. What are you talking about? It was absolutely nothing that they did for this poor young man. So, and with my mom, it was our family that took care of her and made sure that she had a house over her head and food on the table, and protected her as much as we could. She was so distrustful, she couldn't even follow doctor's orders, and that ended up being her death because she couldn't even take care of her own health with that. So, and it's tough watching that. It's just really tough watching that on somebody you love. So, wouldn't wish it on anybody. And here we are promoting it with legalized marijuana. Sorry, I'm deadly against it because of my experience that way.
So what do you think the best pathway forward is to kind of deal with that issue? Like how can government help with that?
You know, there hasn't been any new medication really promoted for helping mental illness. They took a big wrong turn there, especially when my mom was first being diagnosed, where they were saying it was all the family's fault. They were just not accepting to her and they were causing her mental illness. And my sister and I would look at each other and go, she was like this long before we came around to do any impact on her. You can't talk your way out of it. That it's like talking, you can beat your head against a post and get more response than you can trying to talk with a person in a schizophrenic break. They need more research. That would be helpful, but it also needs to be research in physiology. So I have my master's degree in exercise physiology, to learn what the body is going through when you exercise and all the chemicals that it's exerting and how that affects the long-term effect on the body's physiology. They need to do that with the brain. The brain is kind of the last frontier, and they're not really sure of what is causing that schizophrenia. So it could be a smaller hippocampus, not sure of that. Could be abnormalities in the brain. It could be synapse chemicals that aren't operating right. So there could be more research that way. They have to have facilities for those that are in full-blown schizophrenic break because they are a danger to themselves and a danger to others. So if they're a schizophrenic and they're saying, I'm going to kill this person, you better believe them. You have to look at it from their point of view. They have all these fears and they believe the fears are real. So if you believe someone's out to kill you, what defensive things would you do to protect yourself from that person? That's reasonable if you really felt they were out to kill you. So that's where they will harm somebody else because of that. My mom would drive 90 miles an hour trying to get away from somebody she was sure was out to try and kill her. It was on these little 2-lane roads with us kids in the car. So yeah, that's not fun out that way. A lot of our homeless have the mental illnesses that cause them not to be able to keep a job, pay their bills, and have a roof over their head. They can't do it. So they need some kind of care where they can have medications that do work administered to them. Otherwise, they won't take it because the doctors are out to kill them. Would you take medicine from a doctor who's trying to kill you?
I struggle to take medicine from doctors that aren't trying to kill me.
Just taking the medicine that you feel like is going to be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was really difficult getting to it. And the interesting thing is my mom had an identical twin. And she had it too. But she was helped with the medicine, but to get her to take the medicine, the social workers had to come to her house and give her an injection every 6 weeks. My mom would never consent to that. So she never got that kind of help up there. The medicine helped her, but the psychiatrist wasn't listening to us and he overdosed her, darn near killed her. It's like, and we were telling him how much the aunt was taking, and because she was in her 60s at that point. And it's like, you don't have to give him as much, but he quadrupled the amount. And she ended up with dyskinesia, where you can't swallow. And then they didn't believe her. And then when they tried to test it, they ended up putting barium dye into her lungs. So she had, pneumonia out of that. And it was a struggle. Yeah, my dad finally said, we're not doing anything more. I'll just live with it. So he took care of my mom for the rest of her life that way. So.
Man, that's difficult.
Yeah, it's kind of hidden, and it's not good, well-known public knowledge. So if a person, but more and more people are starting to see it, But that's the homeless on the streets out there, and trying to help them, very difficult, very difficult. We actually had a judge that was a little ahead of his time, because there was a stigma of incarcerating people in Warm Springs. You couldn't do it for more than 30 days, and then they'd be out. So he ordered, when we got guardianship of my mom, because she wasn't taking care of her health, and she wasn't taking care of her business land and things like that she'd inherited. So we got guardianship. She was mad as hops at us. That judge ordered her to take treatment. So that didn't have an end date on it. So she had to take treatment. Problem was, we couldn't get the doctors to cooperate. We, the family, we would know when she was coming off of medicine. We would know, and they wouldn't listen, because we're not the professionals. We were just the family. So that was a really difficult part of it too, is just dealing with the professionals when they wouldn't listen. They'd see her for 10 minutes, maybe every month, once a month, charge us an arm and a leg for it, and give us no help. So
that seems like that could still be a problem. Doctors seeing you for 10 minutes and then.
Yeah, and like I said, for how did Mom get that? We don't know. It could have been that her mom had a virus at a critical time in the fetus's development. Don't know, or just an abnormality between the twins. So we don't know. There's other causes of that mental illness. I think drug abuse is part of it, because it depletes chemicals in the brain. Some of that drug use does. And that's marijuana. They need to study, why does that make these boys come in with paranoid schizophrenia as part of their overdose presentation in the emergency rooms. Colorado had a whole spat of that, and their communities are starting to rethink legalizing marijuana down there, and especially at the concentrations of THC we have in it right now. It's just, is it THC or TCH?
I think it's THC. I don't know much about marijuana.
I get the initials, but the cannabis, yeah. And
that seems like it could be quite a problem for like rural Montana, because there's a large part of Montana that's very rural. Gallatin County is one of the more populous counties.
There isn't treatment for it. If you're in a rural county and there's no treatment, are you any different than if you're in the city with no treatment?
No, I just meant there might not be facilities
to carry them. But we talked with our sheriff, and we kind of gave them a heads up saying, if you get a call from my father who's trying to take care of my mom, you don't ever go out there for this. It'll be a domestic abuse or whatever domestic incident. You don't go out there with less than 3 people. He says, when you go with a full complement. We did have to call the sheriff and have them escort my mom to a hospital because she had stage 1 uterine cancer, and she wasn't going to take care of it. So we committed her and had her on the psych ward in the hospital and forced her to get the cancer taken care of. So, and that had to be with an arrest from the sheriff that participated in that. We had a neighbor who, his mom was little and he was big. He'd just pick her up, put her in the car, and take her to where he needed to get her to go. So, but yeah, I mean, just how families cope was just, you survive. I talked with my cousins on how they coped when their mom was bad. And it's just like us, we all disappeared. Just leave them quiet, leave them in a dark room, leave them with little stimulation and no controversy at all, because they just can't handle it. They just couldn't. So that's one of the ways we all coped. Very similar between our 2 families of that one. So I am interested in the mental health facilities, that they have good ones, but I also, root causes. what is causing that, and can we make an impact at that level? And drug abuse, illegal drug use is a big one that I think enforcement would help. And then research on the marijuana, we got it legal right now. Is it safe? So I'm collecting different facts on other issues that come up with marijuana use. Right now you can get, a lot of people use marijuana to decrease nausea, especially with chemo treatments. It can cause the opposite, where you have uncontrolled vomiting. And that is something that the marijuana use will cause. So it messes up that whole system in your brain that controls the nausea. So that's another one that's in there.
So the war on drugs left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. How do you kind of balance that? Those that have swung the pendulum so far, because the war on drugs went all the way this way, where we gotta incarcerate everybody for holding anything, and that left a bad taste, and we're kind of seems to be starting to lean the other way. How do you find that balance? What is that balance, if you know?
Illegal drug use is it's an addiction. Of course, they like the feeling that they get from it, and it causes them to blank out all their other problems. It's like anesthesia, of course, for their different issues. Better personal coping mechanisms might help. In high school, we actually had some classes that taught a little bit of psychology, and self-coaching would help, but also community connectiveness, family connectedness, and having a support system where you're having the life issues, you have a support system. Our family survived with my mom's schizophrenia because we were a cohesive family. So I had 3 siblings and my dad, and then we had my cousins going through the same thing. So we had that support system there. The community didn't understand. Our church didn't even understand. The sheriffs did, because they saw the effects of it. The sheriffs did, and the ambulance people did. So the connectedness, helping people have real conversations and real connectedness with real people, that would be a good place to start.
Yeah.
To help them with that. But then you have to have the laws and enforce the laws against the abuse of drugs. So they've already done the experiment in Seattle and Portland of giving out needles and allowing a drug use on the streets. And it's mayhem. It's absolute mayhem for all the law-abiding people, where they can't even walk down the sidewalks anymore because of all the crap that's on the sidewalks and the people living in urine-filled tents out there that they can't take care of themselves, and dead bodies from people who are dying because we're allowing them the freedom to do their own thing. And it's like, yeah, we can put pressure against the unrestrained freedom to destroy yourself. I don't think that's a freedom anybody really, really wants for our society, is to allow people just the freedom to destroy themselves through that rampant drug use. So and they need to give them treatment centers. I think that's the best, but it is a difficult and hard working with those folks, because that is their only coping mechanism, is the drugs. So
sorry.
Yeah.
And we're talking about drug use, and we're talking about mental health. At that point, the reality you and I might understand and their reality aren't the same.
No.
And it's very hard to get those realities to mix.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a tough one. So just, I'd say better research so we have better solutions, maybe medically. Yeah.
So you're talking about family support systems. How do you think it is best to help bring cohesion to family units to support some of this? Because we do have a problem with families getting separated.
Well, we're not very coordinated with interpersonal relationships, and we're getting less and less so with our social media and smartphones, and all of our electronics are just preventing us from having relationships. I think one of the best ways to practice relationships is to have a bunch of siblings. Sorry, siblings will knock a lot of nonsense out of you, and they will also be your best friends for the rest of your life. So that is good. A cohesive family is so important on the well-being of everybody. So we can support that. I think we need to support the nuclear family better and make that nuclear family stronger, where the mom and dad can stay married. If we need to have better teaching, and I think it's the morals that come from having a good, solid religious background where you know God is watching and you got 10 commandments He's given you, and that's a great place to start. And it makes for a more civilized society as well. But the family, the basic family of a mom and dad and children, needs to be elevated in our thinking in our society as something to be protected and something to be promoted as the best basis for raising a well-centered and well-adjusted and well-balanced children and future citizens for the country. And it's at that basic family level.
Well, and some of the tax stuff you're talking about can help that, right? Because we're talking about property taxes. So that's the affordability of owning a house. You can, if you help that, it makes it easier to have a house with a family. Perhaps child tax credits and state incentivizing children. And
I think the number one reason people get divorced is finances. So do we teach good finances in our schools and colleges? Did you have a finance class in any of your?
I took one accounting class in high school, but that's not exactly finances.
No.
That's strictly bookkeeping.
Yeah, how to keep track of the money you spend, but the strategies on how to spend and not spend that's I would call more of a finance class. And when you understand, we homeschooled our daughter through high school, our second daughter, and we made her take a business math class. And in that business math class, she had to learn about insurances. She had to learn about loans and mortgages. And she had to learn all those things that you run into it as an adult. And if we hadn't had that, she'd probably not known any of those strategies on how to navigate that. So yeah, she came out very frugal. So yeah, on that one. And just how compound interest works, all those kind of things. So
I did see that the Trump administration created those accounts for children born after, what was it, 2024? I can't remember.
Yeah.
One of their big talking points was compound interest.
Oh, yeah. Because it's works both ways. But yeah, that's a good way for investing and how quickly your money can grow, is to learn about compound interest and doing the math for it. Right now you can get on a computer and it'll compound it for you. Just tell you what your interest rate is for how many years, and it'll spit out a number for that. But it's also, this is something you teach at age 2 in a family. And you know what they're learning at age 2 when you teach them this is called self-denial, self-control. And that is something that parents need to be encouraged to teach their children early. 2-year-olds are very selfish, they're very self-centered, and they are very demanding about it. And that's the parent's job, is to teach them how to wait, how to teach them delay gratification, how to teach them to control their temper, and those kind of things, because they're adult strategies they need to stay out of trouble when they're an adult and to stay out of debt when they're an adult. So you teach it at age 2 and 3 and 4, all the way through there. So
there's nothing quite like trying to teach delayed gratification to a child, that is a hard concept for them because it's such a large portion of their
you know how long
life at that point.
Yeah, you know how long it takes?
How long?
Till about age 18. So you're never done. You're teaching it for a long time, and it's just the lessons get different. At 2, you're teaching them to eat their peas. What do kids learn when you make them eat their peas? Well, they don't get to eat just what they like. They can eat things that are good for their body because it's healthy for their body. And so you control your likes and dislikes. Yeah, it doesn't have to be your favorite, but you're going to eat your peas anyway. So that's the self-control. That's the self-discipline that you're teaching them at age 2. As a teenager, you're teaching them, no, you don't get to spend your whole paycheck and blow it all on one car when you could have this car and still have money left over. So you're teaching them the choices that come with the self-control. You may want that stuff, but just because you want it doesn't mean it's right for you to go after it. So as a control of desires, the Bible has a very good verse that says, where do wars and murders come from among you? It's because of your own strong desires. So you teach the child, you teach the adult to be wary of your emotions, be wary of your strong desires, because they'll lead you down the wrong road very quickly if you don't have some control of them. Yeah.
So there's a question I want to ask everybody I interview or have a conversation with.
Sure.
And thank you for being my guinea pig on the first one.
Okay.
So you're the first one to get asked this question.
Okay.
But speaking of young people and children, what is one piece of wisdom, principle, or value that you hope the next generation of Montana never forgets, and why?
Don't be afraid to fail. I had a Russian friend tell me that the thing that was different about America was in Russia, you didn't fail. They just kind of kept you very poor, but at a static level. But in America, you could fail. You could fail catastrophically. But what do you learn from your failures? You learn so much. You learn a lot about yourself. You learn a lot about your environment around you. You learn just valuable lessons that will equip you to go on and be a success in other ventures. So you don't have to beat yourself up because you didn't get the success you wanted. Don't look at failure as a total bust. It is the school of hard knocks, and it will teach you an awful lot. So don't be afraid to try things and take risks and fail.
Well, I appreciate you opening up your home for this conversation.
Yep, you're very welcome.
If people want to find you, where should they go?
For my campaign, I have a web page called estherformontana.com, and they can go there. And that kind of tells my views on the different issues that are in front of us culturally and politically at the moment. And so that's a good one. And it has my contact information on that webpage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I learned a lot.
Okay.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation as well.
Old people have a lot to tell. They do. They've lived a lot. My brother was a CNA. His daughter wanted to be a CNA, so he took the classes with her because he was just getting newly retired from farming. And they got a job together when they were done with the CNA classes. And being my brother, he knew every person's story in that whole building. And he'd listen to them, and he could tell you stories from those folks of the lives they had lived. And they appreciated him valuing them to listen to their stories. That's the best part about being a campground host, is you get to hear everybody's really good stories, especially from you guys, about how you almost killed yourself for the 3rd time.
Well, I'm excited to keep interviewing people or having conversations with people because I'm going to learn a lot of stories.
Yes, you will. Well, thank you for coming
Thank you.
and spending the time with me.